glad you could come to the May Open Studio. I wish I could say that it was a lovely May day out there, but it started more promising than it is now. It's pretty darn cold. Seem to always start with a weather report, something about it. Maybe I'm just wishing on the good weather to arrive. Anyway, got a variety of things that I wanted to show you today. I've been working on a few different projects, so you're going to see bits and pieces of a couple of things. And as usual, if you don't mind just muting yourself, and if you have questions, unmute. And if anyone does wind up forgetting, that's all right. I'll remind you as we go along. But as again, nice that you're here. So anyway, I always feel like the seasonal shifts kind of get me just like a little turned around, because I do tend to paint very much by the season. And it doesn't mean that I don't occasionally, sneak things in that are out of season. I do that. But, the last few months, I really have done more things that are in the way of looking at the interiors. I've done some still life, things that are a little bit more outdoors based. And the end of April, I got really hepped up because I'd taken a group out to Sandy Neck to paint, and it's like, oh, like I'm dying to get in there and the plein air painting and work off some of my photographs in the studio from places that I've been. So the transition there for me, it always winds up revolving around, okay, it's the season, what's happening? So I kind of got a little ahead of myself. So I was getting some ideas together, and I started prepping boards because, I had mentioned before how I wanted to do some larger paintings, and I'll go over that in a minute. So I was prepping boards, and I found a painting that I'd put to the side that, I hadn't really, there it is, that I wasn't really too excited about how it was working out. So I just put it to the side. And I'll explain a few reasons why I wasn't excited about it. My favorite paper, as you know, if you follow me or take my classes, is pastel matte. And there's something about that texture of the paper that I love the way it holds my marks. I'm not one for doing much smudging or blending. And I just really do like that capacity that the tooth has to look as if it's smooth, but have an incredible grip. So what I had done is, I can't remember if someone gave them to me or if I bought them. I had some papers that pastel matte that were mounted on board. So this is on matte board, and I have a feeling I bought them, to tell you the truth. And well, I went and had them done at the framers. And I was reading afterwards, and of course, I should have looked up the details to explain it to you better, but there's a hot and a cold press, I believe, the way that they can actually mount work. And one of the ways does not react well with the surface. So when I started painting this last year, it was like, I even thought maybe I had the wrong side. I mean, it just was not holding the surface the way I wanted it to. And I'd already done several ocean scenes, those ones where I'm in the water with the camera and I'm taking pictures with my camera in a special bag with the water right up to the lens. So, but I couldn't bear to throw it out, because it's a 16 by 20, and thrifty me, I don't want to throw out the money that I put into this. So I thought, well, I'm prepping all these boards. Why don't I just put some of the ground, the pastel ground, right on this surface, right over the painting? It's not working anyway. I could have washed it off, but I knew it was the actual surface that was the problem. And I do believe it probably was not mounted in the correct way. And I apologize for not looking it up. I should have actually, so I could tell you. But anyway, it wasn't holding. It was very smeary. I really did feel like I was working more on a surface that didn't have any tooth at all, which we know for pastel becomes really a bit of a headache. So what I did earlier today, I added 2 coats of pastel, and I've got the materials to show you here. So I have a huge, gigantic, I have a bucket like this, I have a really big bucket of the stuff because I use a lot of it. But, for examples, I keep some of the smaller ones around. So the golden acrylic ground for pastels is really good. I like that one. The other one is the golden fine pumice, and it's a little bit finer than this one here. Do not buy the coarse. The coarse is like popcorn ceiling, and I think I've told you guys that before. Very, very coarse. So when this is in the jar, let me show you. I'm trying to avoid popping in and out, but I guess I am. I think this might be a new jar. It is. I'm not going to open it because I'm not going to use it for a while. So let me open up this one because I know this one's opened. Okay, famous glass. Oops, I got it. Okay, it's very thick. Okay, you can even see it's starting to move out, but I mean, it's really like the way I describe this is when you get it, it's like a very thick brownie batter, cake batter, really thick one. And what you want to do is put the quantity you need in another container and then mix enough water with it so it turns into something that's a little bit more like a thick pancake batter. So it's pourable, but it's not a crepe. And I've used that example before too. So it just still has body to it. You don't want it. It's certainly, I don't even think it's probably, a 1/16 of water to the quantity. It's a very small quantity. It's nowhere near half and half. The difference of the more liquid that you add to it, the more you're dispersing that ground. And of course, the more you disperse the ground, the less truth you have. And if you do that, it's not a problem. You just have to put down more layers because the purpose of this is it takes a smooth surface and it gives it a grit and a texture. And I prefer this to I know people use other things, but it really is the actual pastel grounds like. And somebody does have just check your mute because we can hear either a phone conversation or music. I think Mary Jane, yours is off. Yours is on. Let's see if I can ask people to mute. Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so there's two examples. Now, you don't need any really fancy supplies with it. It's just a house brush. So different types of house brushes. And this one's a fairly smooth house brush. Partly, and I love the ridgy ones, but partly for this, you have to remember there's a painting that's underneath 2 coats of this. And it went on randomly. And when I say randomly, it means I'm just putting it on any which way. I'm not like paying attention to the different way the waves are moving or the trees that are way in the background or even the sky and the cloud. I'm just putting it on randomly because I really do like that. I like the surprise element. I like the challenge. I just love the fact that if my painting shifts around, I haven't narrowed myself down to keeping the trees back there in that order or keeping cloud in there because I've painted the texture, in that direction. Sure, I could go over it. It really wouldn't make much of a difference, but the brushes, just regular old house brushes. So this that is what I use to set this up. So then once I did this, I thought, okay, what am I going to do with this? And I've been mulling over a couple of ideas this afternoon, and what I really want to do. Okay, yep, somebody else has got their. Yep, let me just a second. I think somebody must have, Mary Jane, I think yours must be just automatically going, turning back on again. Okay, so anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some acrylic inks on this because I decided if I'm experimenting, I might as well experiment altogether and just let's see what happens. I've used the pumice ground and I've used acrylic inks, but I've never used them over an existing painting. And the acrylic gel medium here, the pumice ground, it does give it a cloudy look. And always look on the back of because it will tell you how transparent or opaque the item is. And this is partially between transparent and opaque. So, I mean, I knew I was going to lose some of the color. Just a second, let me look at this one, see if this one, okay, so this golden one, the acrylic round, that one says that it is transparent. So it's something that I could look, I'm not worried if it's filled in. So anyway, so I'm gonna leave this brush behind. And I've got a couple of different acrylic inks here. And I don't think it was last year. It might have been the year before. Oh, maybe it was last year. I did a painting where I was using acrylic inks, and I do love them because they have a real, you can get, well, the color selection's amazing. And I use the FW brand here, Deli Rowney. And it's what's so really nice is if you really want to get that intensity of color, you get them with these acrylic inks. Now, two things. One, if I put the acrylic ink on first, and then I put the pumice ground over it, it would also go muted because of that cloudy feel. And I want it to be really intense. I want to have real pops of color that I'll then put the pastel over. So I have made a point of, well, one, clearly there's pastel under it and it would mix with this, so I can't do that. So this here, giving it a good shake, you have to shake these up really well. So while I'm shaking, I'm just going to show you a few things. What I did was I have a sheet, and when I have a series that I'm working on, I make little swatches of colors that I used in one or more paintings. And that way, when I go to do it again, now it's been a while since I've done any of these water stains, I've got a little bit of a head start because I do have those swatches that'll give me an idea of where to start. Doesn't mean I have to use those colors, but I don't have to go pecking around through the box trying to think of where did I start last time. I've already got that. Okay, good shake. You have to shake these up really well. They do separate. And I'm just going to pour a little in here. I've got a couple brushes here. I don't have a sink in my studio. It just used to be an office. So I tend to keep a bottle of water in here, and that actually usually does the trick. So I'm just going to pour some in here. Put the lid on because I know I would be knocking this over if I wasn't careful. And I'm just going to pull out, put a glove on because I'm going to try something a little different with the glove. And I use both the glove and those barrier creams. I like them both. If I'm doing something messy, I tend to use the glove. If I'm painting just in the studio, I tend to use the barrier cream. Okay, so let me get the brush. Here we are. Okay, so it's a soft bristle brush, but it's not an expensive one because I am dragging this over a surface that has a bit of a grit to it. So what I want to make sure is I don't want to ruin a brush that's expensive. So this one, okay, we're going to test the color on the side. Okay, now I'm going to do this color first as opposed to the dark because I'm just going to go mush some of these in, and I'm not going to cover up everything that's underneath. But what I want to do is I want to set in for where I want the waves to be moving. Oh gosh, look at that. That's like way too similar. So let's move here. I don't have, I'm sure the photograph's somewhere. I didn't even bother to look for it because what I want to do is just be a little bit more spontaneous with this rather than getting wrapped up with the, okay, so that's swinging around. That I swing a little bit too. Those are, okay, I kind of broke that up a little bit. I'm going to break this guy up by bringing that in here. Okay. Actually, I must admit, sometimes it's really handy to be looking at the camera because I get to see, okay, so I've got this big wave over here. I want to Okay, and then we're just gonna press that just a little flicker there. So I've created a nice, okay, I've created a nice movement in there. You know, I've talked about before active and passive entries. So I've got this real active where I've got a heightened angles here, and as they go back here, they do tend to flatten out. Just going to put a little one right there just to exemplify that. And there's like a crest of a wave right there. So I'm going to leave that, not doing anything in the background. That's going to be off in the distance. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let me push that drawer in. I'm just going to get in here. Oh my gosh, look at how fast that dried. Holy moly, I guess I'm not going to be doing anything too quickly with that. So here we go. Okay, so there you go. It dries really quickly. So let me just get my paper towels. Is this right here? Okay, there we go. And I'm gonna, so I don't want that to be too thick. I'm gonna do that with my finger, but clearly because it's dried so incredibly thick, got to get in there. And the idea is that I'm giving a little bit softer edges back here. Okay, so those guys are same thing over here. Get in there. So now I know when I do the next one, and there's that dark right in there, bring that panel right through. And I want some of those colors to show underneath. And I'm not going to do as much here because I would like some of those to stay a little harder or found edges. Soften that a little bit, bring that color down. Oh, this is the other thing I love about you. Oh, this is alcohol, by the way, isopropyl alcohol. You get in there and just rub away. So ideally, what I should have done, and this is all learning experience here, is I should have actually done a section squirted while it was first down and then going through. But I'm getting that effect I've wanted. I don't know if you can see well enough through here where I can still see the color that's underneath. Clearly, it is affected by this really incredible blue that's on top. I don't want it to be in isolation anyway. Let's get this guy down a little bit. And I have used alcohol on pumice ground before, and it does well provided you don't like go crazy. I'm reaching about the limit of putting alcohol up here, because what will happen is if I keep adding more alcohol and scrubbing it, what it's going to happen is I'm going to scrub up the layer of pumice ground that's underneath, and I don't want to do that. Okay, so let's just come in here. Okay, keeping some of those edges showing. Really nice, soft. Well, it's already looking more exciting than it did when I started. You know, it just was, you know, it was just very much the same. I just, you know, part of it was the way the medium was working, but I think probably part of it too is I kept getting a little bit too samey with the colors. So, you know, you don't want the same colors down here to appear back there. Okay, oh, wow, this is what I was hoping was going to happen. There's this, because there's this very yellowy white underneath here, which is a light value, adding this blue on top and swirling it like that, which truthfully, I still want to try it with my fingers sometime. I just thought it'd be fun to come in. Oh, here, let's try this. Okay, I'm going to use this brush, same one, and I'm just going to come in where some of this is really a little bit wet. Okay, and I just, oh, you know what? It was kind of better that I let it dry because I'm not getting any of the lines showing at all. line is just totally disappearing. And I didn't want the line to show. So I'm going to use that. I can see right through it. That's lovely. See, and this is why these dark areas, that's why I didn't want to start with the dark, you know, partly because, you know, one, I haven't done this before. And two, I was afraid if I start with the dark, it's going to be very heavy. And I want the water to feel light. So by putting down this middle value, bright blue, and then letting it dry, and then scumbling or dragging darker colors over in certain spots where I want it to be dark, that I think it'll work out a little bit better than having put, because I am a bit of a dark to light kind of painting girl here. Let's come down here. Okay, that looks lovely. So let's try something else. When you are washing off acrylic ink from your brushes, if it is still wet, you can use water. If it starts to dry at all, you have to use acrylic ink. Another reason I like using the acrylic inks is, let's say if I make a mess with pastel in a section, I want to like get in there and wipe out the pastel. If I use the water, it'll take the pastel off, but not the alcohol. If I use alcohol, it'll take off both the pastel and the alcohol. So yeah, you want to be really careful how you use that so you don't wind up, and I'm going to stick this in water now so that I don't ruin this brush. You know, the brushes, you want to buy, you know, if you're a pastel artist, you can use paint mediums. What you want to do is you want to buy a brush that's good, not too expensive, but key things is you don't want one where that'll work. You don't want one where the bristles are going to come out, because what's going to happen is the bristles are going to get left behind, no matter what medium you're working in. But with pastels, you'll have those bristles left behind. And if they dry into your underpainting or your medium, your pastel is going to pick up those bristles, and you're just going to have little lines all over the place. So now what I want to do is I want to take this same color, and I am going to add a little bit of this. I've got this lovely iridescent, and this is this one is an iridescent white. And I have one that is an iridescent blue, and I think I'm going to switch, and I'm going to do it iridescent. I didn't plan on doing this part. So we're going to go like this. We're going to shake this guy up. Any questions on acrylic inks while I am shaking away here? I just have about another 30 seconds before I'm ready. Any questions?
It's Deborah, and I wanted, could you, what are the layers that are on this painting right now, from the beginning till now?
Okay, of pastel, there's probably about 4 layers of pastel. And, you know, very unexciting 4 layers of pastel that really kind of blended together. And when I say blended together, I like to have one layer and be able to, when I stroke over with the next one, see a little bit of the other layer that's underneath. And because of the texture, I was losing that. You know, when I put another layer on, you wouldn't even know there was anything underneath it. It just covered it up. Like I said, I think that was, you know, a fault in the way that it actually was mounted, and it may have just compressed the tooth too much. And in doing that, you know, I didn't have the same capability. So yeah, it had about 4 layers of pastel, and it did have an underpainting, and the underpainting was with a very dark blue, and that would have been pastel and alcohol. And then it had 2 layers of the pumice ground mixture that was thin to about pancake batter. That took about, well, I used the blow dryer earlier today, but you know, without the blow dryer, it probably would have taken on a day like today about, you know, 2 hours to dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look. Any other questions while I'm just doing a little mixing here? Any other questions? Okay. So I'm going to take my shimmery blue here, and I am going to mix it in with that blue that I just used. And I am going to put that there because it's a little cheatery over on the other side. Going to take my same brush, wipe it off because it's been in the water. Let me just put a little bit of that here. Don't need much color in this at all. I want to make sure it's just a little bit of a drizzle. Let's get that white. It's funny, it says it's a shimmery blue and it really has more of a, yeah, it says shimmery blue. It feels a little bit more pink than it does blue. So I am using a very small amount of blue and I'm just mixing it in there. Perfect. You know what? I'm going to switch brushes because I don't want any of this solid to get there. So let me just grab this guy. He's a scared brush. He's got those bristles that are going in a million different directions. So we're going to just see what happens here. Okay, I'm going to just come in and I'm, very faint, but look at that. Look at that lovely edge that's appearing there. Okay, yeah. Let's hope that doesn't drip, but if it does, no big deal. Trying to do it, yep, there it goes, just a little drip, just slide that over, give it a little trough to follow. And I'm just gonna put some of this shimmery blue in a couple of spots. And if it drips, it's really no big deal, because don't forget, I'm going to be going over this with pastel. So I'm not going to go loopy trying to, and I'm trying to put a lot of this on the edges of the blue, as if it's that little bit of foam that's coming from, oh yeah, that actually, ooh, look at this. This looks really nice. I'm just going to come through. Not touch the other. I'm going to add that in a couple of little spots. So this has got like a nice little, exactly what it means. It's got a little shimmery appearance to it. And because it's a shimmer, it's not a solid white. I didn't want a solid white line. If I want a solid white line, I can do that with my pastel later. I don't want a solid white line. Just coming through and kind of following what I had before. I had this lovely area where I had pulled the blue over that white pastel. So I don't want to cover that totally up. So I'm just going to kind of expand it and bring it around here. And I'll put a little bit on this edge. These are just going to be little markers so that I have a little pattern of where these lines are. I say lines, they're really just the edges of where the water, oh, and now I can go like a little bit more crazy down here. Okay. Hit a few of those little things here. And back here. Okay, because this looks really nice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and I'm going to brush this across that back. So I'm not going to see as many of the waves off in the distance. I did another painting where I took and I did not do the horizon straight. I did the horizon a little bit on a curve, and I am going to change that in here. So I've got some lovely drippy things happening here. I'm going to soften this. I'm going to soften this whole edge back here with that same blue. Oh, look at it, really brought up the color there though. No big deal. Coming down. So what's happening with these thinned acrylic inks is I am still able to see the pastel underneath, which is what I was hoping for. Clearly what went on thick in this very beginning should have thinned it a little bit, but I'll just rectify that by my pastel layers. But all this in here, well, that'll be fun to see how it fits into the painting. This edge is still a little too hard. I thought I was going to like that. When I say hard, it means I can actually just see that. So I'm just going to soften that so that it's got something that's disrupting it and coming around here, up through here. I can even see the violet because I had a little violet. I had variations of blue greens, and blue violets that I used in the water. And then I had some areas where I had used a pretty dark, almost like a Prussian blue. And I had also put in a very, very faint, it's like a yellow that had a tinge of green in it. It was a very pretty yellow. So hopefully those guys will come back up. Okay, so I'm gonna put these over to the side before I knock them over and make a mess. And make sure I don't put anything on the paint when I finish there. Okay, so drips are happening here. Like I said, drips aren't a problem, but if I can maneuver some of them around, I will do that now. Before, remember how quickly it dried? So if I just get in here very slowly, pick up some of these, it's the vertical lines. Nah, do I really want vertical lines in an ocean scene? Nah, probably not. So if I can just catch them before they dry. And what was really handy, there was this really odd shape that had appeared in here. And I was hoping with my, what I mean is somehow there was almost like a little bit of a skin in the surface. So it's like a very minute crater that had formed. And of course, this is after I'd done 2 layers of the stuff. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll just proceed, and if I can get that covered up, great. Okay, we're going to switch gears and colors. And this is going to go in the water, so nothing happens to this one. Over here to the side. And I have a yellow. I want to get some brilliance in there. And I'm going to thin that down too. And
Betsy, can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
At what point are you thinking this is not a pastel painting, but a mixed media painting?
Well, at this
Or
point,
not.
it's definitely a mixed, it definitely would be a mixed medium, partly because I covered all the pastel up with the primer, and I've not the primer, with the pumice ground, and I've not added any pastel on. What I am not going to be worried about that 80% rule for this one. So if in fact I wind up leaving more of the acrylic ink showing and less of the pastel, it's going to wind up being a mixed media.
Okay.
The way that, for people who aren't familiar, the way the competitions in the pastel entries for national, international shows is that the top layer has to be 80% pastel. So you can have whatever you want underneath the pastel, but the top layer needs to be 80%. So I could conceivably, after this, add more, but to a certain extent, that kind of defeats the purpose of playing around all these really nice acrylic inks if I go and I cover them all up with pastel. So
Gotcha.
my idea is I'm going to be leaving some. The reality of it is this may not actually work out the way I am expecting, and then I might wind up putting more pastel on than I originally thought. So we'll see how that goes.
I have a question.
Yes.
I did a painting where I did a painting where I put pastel on and then went over with mineral spirits.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, and it was pastel paper. Then on top of that, I put more pastel, but it was a whole lot of the painting that didn't look like it was pastel, but it was pastel with mineral spirits over it.
Right.
That's just
Yeah,
pastel.
that would be
Yeah.
pastel.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I think if you had and I had, when I first started doing my mixed media really as an underpainting and put pastel on top of it, I did get in touch with the Pastel Society of America, just ask about the regulations, because I didn't want to enter something in a show and then wind up finding out that, you know, I really had misinterpreted the regulations. So if you're not sure about the mineral spirits,
Hmm.
I believe that it's still considered pastel because all
Because
is
there's nothing on
really
top of it.
done when you mix, when you have pastel and then you just add either alcohol, mineral spirits, or water. And then there's other things people use too, to the pastel. The pastel just turns to a paint, but technically it
Yeah.
still is pastel.
Okay. Thank
You
you.
know, it's just a wet pastel, which is a lot of fun. If you've, I did an experiment once and I absolutely loved the painting where I actually wet the surface and I put the pastel on. And it was
That's like
really
painting, yeah.
interesting the way that the pastel reacted to a wet surface. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Another brush. I'm not taking time to clean them in between. So I'm just going to test this guy on the side. Oops, let me just wipe this guy off a little bit more. This is one of my, oh geez, this brush, I don't like this brush. It's, let's try this guy here. He must have had, hang on a second. I have a drawer here full of brushes. I'm just going to put out a clean one because I am really not too happy with the way this brush is. Okay, this one's clean. You know, sometimes with pastel, you clean the brush, it looks like it's really clean. And then when the brush dries, some of the particles are still there. So two of my brushes over here, that was happening. Now, it might not be as noticeable with the blue, but it's definitely noticeable with this light yellow. So let's see if I've lightened this down enough. Ooh, that looks as though that'll work. Okay. Now, I have to consider the fact that this, I'm going to go right over those trees that are back there, because remember, I'm going to change them anyway. And I really want to get this.
That's still acrylic ink you're using, right?
This is still acrylic ink, yeah. And this, I'm just using my fingers a little bit more. I want to just cover up the trees that are back there and get a little of this in the sky. And I'm gonna, remember I said I did that one, I love the way, it really did feel more like you were on the water with like a curved horizon. So that's why I'm coming right down. Okay. I'm just gonna soften this in a little bit, goes in the water, that's okay. Because this is gonna be a color that's in the sky. So if a little of it's in the water, that's okay. I'm just gonna brush off a little, even though this is a little bit more dry brush now, okay? And I'm just gonna come in and I'm gonna sweep this through. In case I decide to keep those clouds there, just gonna add like a little bit of light up in this area here. And do a little balancing job here. Okay. Now, if I had not put the pumice ground on, I would not be able to be doing all this. I'd have pastel that was smearing all over the place. If there's anyone here who's not familiar with pastel. Okay, so I do like that better. Curving over here. Okay. Now I can see that land in there. I'm gonna bring that up just a little bit more right there. I've muted that down far more. So getting a little bit more personality here. And going to just sweep little bits of this in a couple of spots. Again, you know, this is, you know what I really like about pastel, and this is what I'm not really, if you put a color down and it's just not working in an area, that's really no big deal. You can just go back over it. So I'm just using that same principle here. If I put some of this yellow down and I decide I want a little bit too crazy with it, no big deal. And I like being able to just smear it away so that it is more like a real thin skim of the acrylic ink. So I'm just getting a little bit of that. Not really sure how much that's showing up on there, but I can see this it's pretty thin. And down here, So I've got dark there, so just gonna get a little bit more in here. And play around. And again, this gives it a soft edge. No, I don't want this to feel, oops, something went on here. Let's just do this. Okay, there we go. Just smear that around. Oh, that color looks really nice on there. It looks nice on the blue, but it really livens up that pale color that I had underneath. And although that blue shimmery is still showing, the yellow that's going over it is really heightening. Okay, I'm going to turn this into a little bit of a green. Here's your color wheel. Okay, I'm going to get some of these blues that I have, because this is very transparent. So some of these blues I have, I'm going to turn into more of a bluey green and change them so they feel like they're catching more light. Maybe I'll have to change that sky even more. You know what I'm going to do? Because I've gone so far down with my yellow in the water, and I'm going to need a little bit more yellow up here. And then I can decide what I want to do. And here, you'll probably be able to see it better here. This is very light, so you can see how thin that is. I'm just going to take my, and what that does is I'm kind of picking it up too. This, you know, I kind of toyed with the idea of doing a technique where you put something on, then you pull it. Oh, I could try that. Let me get a paper towel. Well, let me get yeah, a paper towel is better. Let me try this. You know, I don't think I'm going to be showing you the other thing. I'm having way too much fun with this. Anyway, where did I put my, there it is. Okay, let's see if this, I think I showed this to you when I was working on that buoy in the water. I'm going to just get this wet with, this is the rubbing alcohol. This isn't going to work the same with, and I'm going to lift. Okay, so I can go back in there, I can lift some of that. I have to be careful because remember the rubbing alcohol will take the acrylic ink off, but it can also take off the pumice ground. So I have to do this pretty lightly. And just enough where some of those clouds that I have here are coming back a little bit more. So that, and I'm just going through here. Just a little bit more of this. Okay, go. Okay, just enough, just glide that over. Now, I don't want to go touching this too much now because it probably is a little bit disrupted since I did put this on it, so I'm going to leave the top alone. But I do want to resolve where I want that. Boy, my phone's going nutty. I do want to resolve what I'm going to do. Let's try. I don't think I want to do an acrylic ink. Okay, so the reason I don't want to do acrylic ink back there is if I put a dark acrylic ink back in this area, what's going to happen is that dark is going to disrupt that feeling of something in the different distance. So I'm going to avoid that and see some of these areas are still just the pastel. Okay, right through here, I can still see it's the pastel with the pumice coat on it. Some of it is the acrylic. Got really carried away down here, but I had a lot of fun. Back here, I've really gotten rid of it, but that was too dark to start with. You know, I had abandoned the painting anyway, but I'm going to just come in here. I'm going to establish where I want that curve. And I am wondering, let's see what this is like. See, okay, this is, I've used these for other things, but I've not used them for on a board like this. And this is art graph. Let me show you the packaging. I put it back in so you can see the label. Art graph. And the ones that I've used in the past are, you know, not as colorful as this. They're more of a terracotta. They also have them, I believe, in black and white. They have them in a variety of colors. And it is this, good question, what kind of medium is this? I totally forgot what it does. It's a water soluble. And you can get them both opaque and you can use them opaque or transparent. I'm going to use them a little bit transparent. That's what that means there. And they're ideal for drawing. It's really fun. I got them for a figure class that I was doing with Casey Klon, and or else it was Dawn Emerson. And they're really a lot of fun to work with. Partly is because of the shape. You know, you can, you know, when you make lines, you know, you can really make all different sorts of fun lines. Anyway, okay, so we're gonna get that down and just gonna make a little bit of a mark here. This is still a little wet. So let's get this back, and I'm just gonna pick this up. Oh, you know, I forgot to, you know, I love this, like to give it, I might have done too much liquid on here to do the art graph, but I'll give it a try. But I give it a minute to dry. So this is on a board. Okay, this is a board too. I'm putting it on my easel, but there's no clips here because this is just a huge, gigantic piece of black foam core. I do not like using gator board underneath. It doesn't have the amount of give I want. I want it to be a slightly, wouldn't say soft, but at least I don't want a hard surface underneath. And gator board's too hard. So the foam core works good. But if you're trying to hang something like this, you know, and I usually use tape, it doesn't work. So what I do is I make my hinges out of duct tape. And that's what you see right there. That's a hinge. So part of that is behind the board. And then there's the duct tape at the top, just like a hinge. And then I use push pins to hold it at the top. And then at the bottom, well, this guy, in all my excitement, must have knocked it off. And then I just use push pins at the bottom so they stay in. And if I wanted to, I could put a push pin underneath, but they're just, it's not going through the board. It's just the way the shape is, it holds it in. So let's see if I've talked enough, if I can try this. Well, you know what, even if it's wet, we'll see what it does. Okay, I might have to stand in front of the camera for this. So here we go. Going to get a little bit of a curve on this side. I have a curve on this side. And I am holding that line where I want my.
Betsy, what kind of pastel do you have there?
This is that art graph. It's actually not a pastel. It's a drawing tool.
Okay.
When I send out the newsletter, what I'll do, you know, with the recording, what I'll do is I'll put a little link to Art Graph on there.
Okay, thank you.
But what it does is Art Graph does react to, like over here, it's a dry surface, okay? Well, I'm standing in the way, you can't see it. It's a dry surface. This is not a great paper to try this on, but this is just that Bristol board that I just like using for demos. I think I can get a little bit more of a curve here. Okay, let's see. This side curves, this side, I can curve this side down. And then I want that up a little bit more of that. And if I've exaggerated it too much, so what? Because when I paint with my pastel, and I could go crazy, I could start putting it in here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to restrain myself so that I don't, but I could, you know, I could come down and I could, but then I think what's happening is I'm getting into something that's a painting. And I think if I came in here with this, I might start to draw too much. So what I'm going to do is some of these areas that I want to be a little bit darker, I'm just going to drag them over, and this is perfect. I'm dragging pretty softly. See this? I'm dragging really softly. So
Betsy, you can
Why,
move,
why did you choose to use art graph?
Because I'm just experimenting.
Okay.
I just wanted to change up this, the background, the horizon as such, but I wanted to give it more of a curve. I was
Okay.
afraid if I used something, that was too dense.
Mhm.
Dense is probably the wrong word, but too opaque. What would happen is that background would be too heavy, and I want it to feel light. I want it to feel as though it's receding. So this, I can see the colors through it. And I
Mhm.
can also see the texture that's there too, which is really nice.
Why did you curve
But-
the horizon?
Okay, whoever just asked the question, can you say it again?
Why the horizon in the back by the trees? Why did you curve it?
Because I want it to feel like you're in the water.
Okay,
And, when I was doing some of my other paintings, I had slightly curved that horizon, and it really had more of that feeling of, being in the water, and you're not necessarily seeing the flat, like when you're standing in the water, you see the flat edge unless there's lots of wave, okay? So when you're in the water, the other waves distort that, what you're seeing in the
Mhm.
distance, because water's in the way. So
Got it.
I like that idea of a little bit of a curve. And like
Thank
I
you.
said, I can go back in over it if I've over exaggerated it. I'd rather always over exaggerate and then pare it back than to try to then build something out, because I feel as if when I'm working, I'm constantly, I start with the big shapes and I constantly make them smaller. So if this is too big, no big deal, I'll make it smaller. Whereas if I made it small and then tried to pull it out and make it bigger, I'd be working against that positive negative that's going on in my brain. So that's the reasoning for that. But so I can come in and some of these areas, I can just add a very light skim. And we'll
so
see.
Betsy,
Yes, say that again, please.
Betsy, you can move the art graph around with water, right?
Yes, you can. You
Okay.
can. So as a matter of fact, I think you can also, like I could come in here. Okay, and see, I could come in and see the way that I'm changing it altogether. And this is just by, I dipped my finger in the alcohol over there. And I could give it like a little more opaque edge rather than just seeing the colors that are underneath show through. And you can actually you can work with this on a wet surface too. This surface really, that dried out pretty quickly. So you can see that changed, that opaque now looks more like the paint, whereas before I could see what the color was underneath. So I'm just gonna come up and I'm just gonna lift it a little bit. Keep different materials around so that if you are experimenting with pastels, that you've got things handy to just play with. And really, I went into the drawer thinking I was going to pick something else out, and I thought, oh, I bought these not long ago. Why don't I try these? So we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to let that dry. I don't want to overdo that. And so let's see. So I wanted to tell you about prepping the board, hanging the board. I now have to let this totally dry. This is looking pretty good. That's going to be a little bit longer. And then I'll be able to go in there and start adding pastel. So for instance, in the sky, just so you can see some of it, I can just come over and that's like a little bit of the blue. And let's just do this corner right here. I'm going to let some of that sky show through. And I'm going to come through. And because it's on a textured board, I'm getting that lovely textural feel. And I want it lighter at the base with some of that yellow that I put in there. Showing, I'm not sure that, that this might be like a little bit too much of a curve. No big deal. Let me come in with that. Knock that off right there. Just put that there. That might work out a little bit better. But as I go along, I could change my mind again. Any questions about that? I'm just gonna zoom in so that you can see what some of these areas look like. So let me just step over to the side, get my. Okay, hit Logitech right here. I'm gonna zoom in. Okay, and then let me just, I'll drop it down. Oh, it looks very, hang on just a second. Looks a little washed out. I don't know if it's just my monitor, but it looks a little washed out there. But you can see the depth of the layers that are happening in there. Even if the color is a little bit muted, there's a lot of layering that's happening in there, which is really what you would expect a little bit more with water, which is what I was not getting. So for an experiment, I would say that this is probably, let's go on up here. So you can see the pastel is on this side over here, right there. A little bit of pastel on the top surface. And I am loving the colors that are happening here. Like I said, in real life, they're a little bit more intense than they are on the, just turn that up just a little bit. Yeah, that might look a little better. The lighting is always slightly challenging. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go back. And just want to answer any questions. Okay, any questions anybody has?
So, Betsy?
Yep.
It's Paula.
Hi, Paul.
When you mentioned earlier that you had used the pastel over a wet surface,
Mhm.
does that ruin the pastel?
Well, yes. Well, I wouldn't say it ruins the pastel. I'm not going to pull out my really expensive pastels and do that. What I was using is and I do really like them. So I'm not saying that Rembrandt's not a good brand. They are a good brand. They are harder. So I had used Rembrandt, and I'd used New Pastel when I'd used the wet. I wet the paper. And I was using them. Partly is I was, and actually it worked out well in the sense that if it was too soft of a pastel, the pastel's stick is going to absorb the water. And because the granules of the actual stick are softer in terms of it has more pure pigment than binding agent, it's going to disintegrate quicker. So the harder pastel, the Rembrandt and the New Pastel, I was able to actually work more with it. Now, if I've only done it twice. So if I was going to experiment more, yes, I could experiment with the other pastels, but it was working fine with the harder ones, which is the Rembrandt and the New Pastel. You got really interesting marks, very interesting marks.
Yeah, I would think so. I think I'd like to try that as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh, I can see you using that with your paintings, definitely, Paula.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so well, thank you for coming for the May open studio. I will finish this painting and I will post it. The video probably will be processed sometimes over the weekend so that you'll get a copy of the recording. If not on the weekend, you'll get it early next week. And I'll also put in a little information about what's coming up. But June, I'm planning on having an open studio. Summertime, I'm gonna, see what's happening and, where that first of Thursday of the month lands. But plein air for people that are local, that's going to be starting the beginning of June. And I have one coaching session that is ending, and there will be a new one that will be starting sometime in the summer. I'm going to kind of adapt that one to meet the needs of summertime, and sometimes people are busier and there's more things going on. So that information will be coming out probably sometime in the middle of May. Okay.
Thank you,
Alrighty.
Betsy. I
Well,
loved
thank you.
seeing, this was all so new. I really
Oh.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yes, yeah. Truthfully, if you have paintings that you're not happy with, might as well try something different on them,
That's
because
exactly.
you already are not happy. So,
Thank you
it's
very
fun.
much.
It is fun to experiment with pastels. It really is. And other.
All right, where am I going here?
So, but thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you.